where people, our members, our viewers watch us, and we thank you for your patronage. Today is the 140th episode of our program, and we have with us Dr. Subramanian Swamy, our patron president of Virat Hindustan Sangam. Today's topic is, as you know, the year gone by, what it means for India, part one. We'll be having two part series. This Sunday we'll be having part one, where we'll be talking about national security, defense policies, and other issues. And the next Sunday we have another guest who will be talking with Dr. Swamy on more on the economy and the basically the business industry and all those issues. We have with us our guest who has been on our show earlier. He is Abhijit Iyer Mitra. He is a senior fellow at the Institute of Peace and Conflict Studies, a defense economist. He is pursuing his PhD in war studies from King's College London. He has regular columns in the print Economic Times, Business Standard, Mint, and the Money Control, as well as bylines in all major national dailies and the New York Times. He has also co-authored two books, one on the military reforms and another on Afghanistan, and has a third book on Hindu rights in India. Additionally, he has several academic publications to his credit dealing with defense and foreign policy. Prior to his current post, he coordinated the National Security Program at the Observer Research Foundation. Concurrently, he is visiting scholar at the Sandia National Laboratories and at the Stimson Center, Washington, D.C. So we are happy to have him on our show. And before I start our discussion with Dr. Swamy taking over, I have to thank my co-host Ramesh Swamy for his support and Professor Arvind Chaturvedi for his support for hosting this program on a Sunday, every Sunday at 8 p.m. Last week's program, we had a viewership of nearly 47,000 viewers across various social media channels and podcasts. I also have to thank our technical team led by Ashish Shetty from Mumbai, Swaminathan from Tamil Nadu, Tejas Navalgul from Pune, Rakesh Gadgi from Karnataka, Ishwar Iyer from Navi Mumbai, Ajesh Nair from Kerala, and Vishal Mehta from Mumbai for their background support to put this Sunday program together. So with these words, I have to, it will be over to Dr. Swamy, but before that I have to tell our viewers, many viewers keep sending messages to us, how we can join Virat Hindustan Sangam. I have to just tell you, it is www.vhsindia.org, www.vhsindia.org. You can go to the website and register yourself as a member. Over to Dr. Subramanian Swamy for the opening comments on the topic, the year gone by, what it means for India, part one. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Jagdish. And welcome to Abhijit Iyer Mitra. He brings two strands together. I've known him since he was a little boy, so I can take liberties with him. When we are talking about the year gone by, I would say it is really in three dimensions. And this three dimensions, one would be, it'll be under one name called governance. How was our governance last year? This is what the people would be asking for. And governance, the three areas where we have had serious issues in governance is what I would like to focus on. One is the governance on the economy, and second is and the associated with it is the internal developments like the farm farm agitation, etc. And the second would be the international governance, how we have dealt with our enemies, how we have dealt with our friends, how we have promoted our security. And the third one would be the issue of the various national problems arising out of internal law and order and a variety of other things. So, I mean, how society is, whether the minorities are persecuted, whether, there's so many social problems, which have come up. So, today, I think because we are dealing with an expert in international affairs, we will take up this topic, and in the later shows of this, the Grand Ganga, we'll take the other issues up separately, the economy separately, and then I think we may have to have a third one on the internal situation. So, what I would begin by saying in the international issue, it appears that, if I put it bluntly, I don't know whether Abhijit will agree with me, we have been a monumental failure in this last 1 year. We are facing a terrible situation with China. Chinese are making us look like sheep. We are only talking about being concerned. The favorite phrase of the External Affairs Ministry is "we are concerned." The Chinese have come, they have crossed the LAC. You want to acknowledge that. They have gone and made colonies in Arunachal. We don't want to acknowledge that. And all we say each time is, "we are concerned, we are concerned." The Chinese say awful things, they give you lectures, and then you end up having a celebration with the Chinese soldiers. The Indian soldiers are forced to go and have a celebration with Chinese soldiers on the New Year's Eve. So I think perhaps I would like this session to be devoted much more to China than the question of Afghanistan. There are many others. What about Quad? What about BRICS? What about how do you deal with neighbors who are difficult, and so on? So, but let me say for today, I would like to tell our viewers about the situation vis-a-vis China. Now, the question would be for us, what is the China problem? Because people are a little puzzled. They keep asking me. I understand it, but people don't understand. 18 times the Prime Minister met one-to-one with Xi Jinping, and 5 times he visited China, all in a question of 5 years. Of course, after 2020, there's been no meeting. First it was the corona, and then of course now this new situation. So in 18 one-to-one meetings and 5 visits to China, and his 3 visits to India, you have come to a situation where our troops are at the border or inside the border. I don't know which I should say. I know it's inside the border. Dealing with China. There have been casualties also. Some reported, some not reported. Galwan, for instance, this time they gave us a New Year's party for our soldiers in Galwan. That means they are back. I thought we had got rid of them. Then you have same issues with Arunachal. So I would like to begin by asking Abhijit, please give us a concise picture of the Sino-Indian or India-China relations. Where do we stand? And connect this up with BRICS and Quad, and what we should be doing to get our land back. Does he think that we have lost our land? Does he think the Chinese have crossed into our land? Yeah. Does he believe in the koi aaya nahi, koi gaya nahi stuff, that sort of thing? So I'd like him to give us a picture of the last 1 year of what happened with China. Over to you, Abhijit.
Thank you, Doctor. So to answer that question, I'll have to give a bit of a background on the systemic failures of this government that have led to then policy failures of the government. The first thing is this great penchant this government seems to have for third-ratedness and mediocrity. And the net result of that is, sorry to use the word, but duffers running policy at every levels of government. And I don't just mean foreign policy. The biggest loss out here has been the loss of narrative.
I said don't insult duffers.
Sorry, I apologize to all. Yes, I apologize to all duffers across the world. I shouldn't have used that term. But the first issue has been severe narrative loss. Everywhere we go, there isn't a single newspaper, a single TV channel, or anything that supports the Indian point of view anymore. Why? Because you're not able to communicate with them. The second problem with the image managers of this government is they think that when a foreign newspaper writes something about us, it is some global conspiracy. They don't have their wits about them to come up with factual rebuttals and responses. And so to save their own hide, what they do is they claim, oh, this is what Indira Gandhi used to do, the foreign hand. They keep claiming this great international conspiracy when in fact they can't sit down to the embassy. All the embassies I talk to keep complaining, cribbing, saying, when are we going to receive our briefing? We don't take our own newspaper seriously, so why are we being clubbed with these people? They don't even reach out to them. They don't brief them. So it's been such a cumulative narrative loss that there are foreign governments looking for you to reach out to them. But to save your own hide, what you do is, it's like that twins. When one kid eats the entire payasam and mummy comes and says, where is the payasam, beta? You turn to your sibling and you say, he ate it, mummy. It's that kind of thing. They club the government up with the press. Now, the net result of this is, for a party that claims to be Hindu nationalist, their need for the validation of a foreigner, of the white man, that acute inferiority complex is truly astounding. What that means is they are perpetually reactive. They are perpetually on the back foot. They can never get ahead of a narrative. They can never get ahead of a event. It's constantly things happen to them. They don't do things to anybody else. And that very curiously reminds you of 15 years of Nehru. Because what we look at today is essentially, it's not Modi 2.0, it's Nehru 3.0, with all the attendant baggage. Now, let's talk about what happened with China. When the initial thing in 2017, when Doklam flared up, I was one of the few people on the Chinese side of the border in Tibet at that point of time. Seeing what was happening out there, there wasn't a major build-up. As it turns out, the Bhutanese decided we were so stupid they could take us for a ride. If you remember, when the entire Maldives crisis was happening at roughly the same time, they decided, the foreign secretary was a bit all over the place and he could be taken for that ride. That foreign secretary is today our foreign minister. And the Bhutanese also decided they could take us for a ride. And now they have concluded their own bilateral pact. So we now know what the entire surrender at Wuhan was all about. Where our troops were in an extremely strong position. And whatever was achieved by their strong position in Doklam was then, very quietly, coyly given away at Wuhan. Now, again, here what has happened, Dr. Swamy, you and I may disagree on where the LAC is, but the fact that none of us can disagree is that the Chinese are building massive permanent infrastructure. As I look at satellite photos today, I can tell you they are definitely on the Indian side of the border in Arunachal. The Indian side of the LAC as after 2013, as I see it. And definitely in certain parts of Ladakh, they are definitely beyond the 1962 line, which has been a continuous Chinese salami slicing effort since 1962, essentially. However, what we are looking at is India is building a lot of roads. Now, roads help you build up every time there are troops out there. The problem is the Chinese are building permanent infrastructure out there. Yeah. We are just building to, every time we see some Chinese build up, you go and buttress your positions and then you bring them down. Now, this isn't an economic load that can be sustained perpetually. China has the economic wherewithal and fiscal power. We haven't seen the kind of bold economic reforms we require here to match up to that kind of economy that can sustain that kind of build up there. So whatever our military position is it credible? Yes. Is it sustainable? No. Therefore, is it credible in the long term? No. Now, where does this come to in BRICS and Quads? Now, BRICS, if you remember, Dr. Swamy, we discussed this last time as well. What we've been seeing in BRICS is that Russia is almost entirely in Chinese camp, because China has a energy monopoly, and the greener and greener Europe gets, the less they depend on Russian gas. Russia is effectively a white Saudi Arabia at the moment. And so they are going to go further and further into Chinese control. Brazil and South Africa really don't give a damn about us that much. Why would they? Because China is a huge economy. We are not. So even within the BRICS, you're essentially playing the odd man out, the kind of second fiddle in this entire thing. I think the only good thing that can be said about India is that we're not in the exactly precarious position of civil society collapse that we're seeing in South Africa. But we're very close to it, given the extraordinarily lax internal security that we've seen over the last 2 years, be it Shaheen Bagh or the violent parts of the farmers' protests. In the Quad, you have your one credible alternative to China militarily, but you don't want to integrate your weapons with the other three members of the Quad. Remember, when Australia, Japan, and America exercise, it's like it's almost like an octopus with one head and three tentacles. Each tentacle knows what to do. In India's case, it's like an octopus hunting with a lobster on the side. The lobster is doing something else, like every other brainless invertebrate. And the octopus, which is one of the brainiest invertebrate, is doing something else. And that sadly is the picture. We are basically aimless. We're essentially like a lobster being boiled alive in water, which doesn't know what is happening to it.
Well, I mean, let's get to a specific issue, and that is the Chinese border law. I did some research on it, and what I found is that it's affecting our towns, rivers, villages, and then in this, of course, what is happening is they have changed names, and 15 names, Indian names, places in Arunachal has been changed, and it's come into effect from 1/1/22. Now, you can't just say, what does the change in names mean? Let them call it by any other name. We call China as Chin, and they call themselves as Jungwo. Now, that's neither here nor there. The question is, in 2017, China had issued 6 official names for places in India. And yet, in none of the meetings, according to what I have found out, Modi raised this question: why are you doing this? And the meetings continued. Then now we have 15 places additional, which include towns. How many towns? 8 towns they are of Arunachal, which is part of India. They've changed it. 4 mountains, even the mountains, soon they'll change the name of Himalaya also. 2 rivers and 1 mountain pass. And all of them are till hitherto undisputed places. Why did you have to change it? And we haven't, the only remark we have made is we are concerned. The border law, which was proposed in March 2021, came to effect yesterday. It was proposed and we never responded to the border law. It prescribes various responsibilities in these names that they have changed for the civilians and the military. And so what is looking like is, like Mr. Chamberlain before World War II kept talking about peace, 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 and then finally came with a famous statement of peace at hand, and the next day the Hitler invaded Poland. So therefore, and of course, Hitler, the British had conceded Czechoslovakia to Hitler without a bullet being fired, and then came to an agreement that henceforth they will not attack any other country. And the moment Chamberlain left and went back to Britain with this peace at hand, with a piece of paper, Hitler invaded Poland, and the whole thing occurred. Of course, Chamberlain had the good sense to resign, and Winston Churchill came in his place. Now, what is our response so far? New Year's party that we had in Kalman. So I am asking you, doesn't there this so-called law? What is it called? The law is called border law. Border law. I mean, they haven't even said that there's a cultural law. They say it's a border law. Whose border? Not theirs, but ours. And they are changing all this. And our prime minister is not saying a word. All right, he's delegated it to somebody. Well, the foreign ministry, not a word. Mr. Defense Minister, not a word. Nobody is telling us what are we going to do. And the Chinese are not stopping at what they started in March of 2020. They are proceeding. They are saying they got all our neighbors now to come on board. They have got the nation we consider the closest to us, Bhutan. They are totally with China. They have in fact officially told us, please don't bother us. We'll take care of China ourselves. The Bangladeshis for whom we liberated Bangladesh, because so many soldiers died for it, they are also with them. Burma is with them. Sri Lanka is the only one who is putting up a fight, and we are treating them like dirt. These two officials, Dawal and Jaishankar, go and strut around there like cocks in Sri Lanka. Tell them, no, fill out this form, fill out that form. We can't give you this loan. But fortunately, because of the vision of Mr. Rajapaksa, he is still holding out that India will come through. And the previous government had taken so many loans from China, which they have to pay. Rajapaksa says, please, at least your loans, you please, reschedule it for payment. Even that, the paperwork is just going on and on and on. So therefore, I would call this as paralysis or catharsis or something worse. But I think the country needs to know what is the situation in regard to this, where the nibbling is going on, and two, what do you think we should do to counter China if you were asked to give advice?
So the first thing, let me take it one by one. The first thing is we seem to be completely, like you said, paralyzed. There is no thought process going on. The thought is essentially like a beggar on the street who doesn't know where his next meal is coming from. So it's like, what is China going to do next and what am I going to do? You're not thinking about what we should be doing today, now, and setting the narrative and the discourse for the future. Like you yourself pointed out, when the previous president, when Mahinda Rajapaksa was in charge, the Hambantota port, even before that, had originally been offered to India to develop. It was only after India said no, because the Indian Foreign Service didn't want the quote-unquote headache of project management, that it was given to China. Even after China developed it, I remember there used to be Sri Lankan naval delegations with personal instructions from President Mahinda Rajapaksa to come here and say, boss, you have these sophisticated French submarines. We will tell you when Chinese submarines are coming in. You sit outside, you collect all the acoustic signatures, all the data and things like that. You come in and take pictures of their propellers, all the classified details, whatever you want. No. We instead preferred grandstanding and spitting on the Sri Lankans instead. And that entire process continues even today. So governments may change. Well, it's like Ozymandias. Leaders may come and go, but the government continues forever. It's that same policy paralysis that continues forever. With the naming, we know the Chinese have a pattern of naming. Again, you see the policy paralysis that we will only react. Why aren't you going and proactively renaming Lhasa or Sichuan province? Or, do things like, for example, show Tibet as a part of India when you stamp a Chinese passport with an Indian visa. Why aren't you doing that? They will never do that. When Tsai Ing-wen, the president of Taiwan, is gracious enough to wish India on its Independence Day and things like that, why isn't Modi even acknowledging her tweet? How is acknowledging her tweet a violation of the One China policy? How is talking to trade delegations here a violation of One China policy? How is intelligence sharing with China, with Taiwan, a violation of the One China policy? They will do nothing. And the Bhajan Mandali keeps saying master stroke, master stroke, master stroke, master stroke. Everything is a master stroke. Tomorrow, if China invades India and comes all the way to Delhi, they will claim it's actually a great master stroke. This is actually the Chakravyuha in which Abhimanyu has come in, and soon it's going to close. And by that time, the Chinese army would have reached Madras, and they'll say, see, it's just going to close now. It's just going to close now. It's literally like Hitler in the bunker. If anybody watches that movie, it's literally like Hitler in the bunker. Deluded that forces, phantom forces, non-existent forces are going to come and finally defeat the Russian troops about to enter Berlin. This is a systematic problem. And I think the issue is, we have to acknowledge this is not a BJP government. This is an IAS, IFS government with outside support from the BJP. None of the BJP leaders actually have a say in this. It is just all micromanaged by the IAS out of the PMO.
That's absolutely correct. I totally agree with you. That is, politicians have very little say in the present government, and more and more people from bureaucracy are being recruited to become ministers also. So it'll be a time when there'll be no politician of the BJP who will be a minister. Let me ask you this question. What is the status of Indian army weaponry when it comes to fighting a local war on the borders of Arunachal, as well as in the western part, Kashmir or Ladakh or whatever you want to call it? Do you think that today a leadership decided that we have had enough talking with the Chinese, now we're going to push them out? I would be surprised if this could end up in a nuclear war, which because it's not that simple. Nuclear wars in this kind of situation are not, in my base, I would say the probability is very low, and that's a probability worth taking. But Indian army, as of now, is it in a position to drive these people back? Number one, even if it takes a year, 2 years, 3 years to prepare, or 2 years, 3 years of battle. And second, how do you think the international community would react if India were to take the Chinese on? And then concluding, if India were to defeat China and send them running back.
Right. Let me deal with number 3, part 1, not happening in my lifetime. But
we can never tell.
So part 1, our troops are much better trained. Our military leadership is much better because Xi Jinping, remember, he has executed his own purges and massive shake-up of the military, mostly to weaken it in terms of internal power politics. Because it's been the first time since Mao Zedong that somebody has had such total command. Even Deng Xiaoping didn't have the kind of absolute control of the state setup that Xi Jinping has had. And if you remember, Mao Zedong was also kind of humiliated once or twice in the party congress, and he would take a back seat and he'd come back with a boom with the Cultural Revolution. Today, you can't even do that to Xi Jinping anymore. So I would actually argue that Xi Jinping is even more powerful than Mao Zedong in a sense. And weakening his army's personnel and high command has been a critical element of it. The other element of it, of course, is the fact that the Chinese conscript system and even the volunteer system, they're too used to creature comforts. There's not enough training and things like that happening. There's too much muddled up. Commanders are shifted from being artillery commanders to parachute commanders to anti-aircraft commanders and things like that. So there's a huge shake-up of leadership. There's no building up of expertise. Expertise is being shifted around, because when you build up expertise, it's like a feudal system. You also build up your own base, like the Praetorian Guard in Rome. So I would say our troops are much better, but our acquisition policies and things like that, we simply don't create economies of scale. So, for example, take the latest thing. We're producing 600,000 rifles, 6 lakh rifles, purchased from Russia, to be locally manufactured from Russia and Amethi. We have about 1.3 million troops. Why aren't you equipping all of them? Why are you doing this? Half the army will be equipped with this, the other half will be equipped with something else, kind of nonsense. So we don't understand economies of scale. None of the basic problems of defense procurement that existed under the previous government have been rectified by this government at all. The third problem is, as I see it, you would need a massive shift in defense acquisition policy in order for the Prime Minister to be able to say, kick them out, and for that order to be followed. Today, if the Prime Minister gives that order, that is simply an unfeasible order. We will be absolutely valiantly defend our territory for the first month, maybe slightly longer than a month. But after that, industrial power always talks. When you have huge industrial might like China, you can't just hold on forever. The South had better generals, the South had better troops, but ultimately in the American Civil War, it was the North that won because of industrial power, in spite of having inferior troops and inferior generalship. It's the same thing. You look at German generals, they were fantastic, but combined against the industrial power of America, Britain, Russia, they simply couldn't hold on. It's the same thing. How will the world react? I'm sure we'll see a lot of crocodile tears from everybody. But India simply hasn't endeared itself enough for anyone to come to our rescue. Number one. Nice. Even removing the endearment part. When we say endearment, I'm not talking about something emotional. People don't jump to, America doesn't jump to Israel defense because they are emotional about it. It's because that endearment has tangible terms. Israel is a fantastic provider of intelligence inputs. Israel is a fantastic war fighter. Israel is a fantastic technology provider. It is an extremely important feeder into the American economy in terms of high tech and startups and things like that. India has none of those. You look at the Indian so-called tech startups, they go to America and identify as Americans, as opposed to Israelis who have dual citizenship and identify both as Israelis who have done their time in the Israeli military. These people have no connection back to their homes. So those bonds simply don't exist. So nobody is going to come to our rescue except ourselves. You don't want to enter an alliance. You don't want to make yourself useful to anybody. And so we'll see a lot of crocodile tears, but we'll see nothing concrete on the ground. And the international reaction would be where the money is. And I bet you virtually every country that trades with India trades about 3 to 4 times more with China.
Yep. Well, let me ask you then, let's consider what we can do. Stop all imports from China. Do you think it's feasible?
No, because you haven't developed your industrial base. Your entire services sector will collapse because the basis of it is cheap Chinese electronics. What prevented us from setting up those bases? Even today, the Foxconn plant, which is in the news for all the wrong reasons, what are they doing? They're assembling parts that are still made in China. They're not making it entirely from scratch in India. I can tell you, I work with a lot of companies, and even they are so buoyed about Make in India. We want to do Atmanirbhar Bharat and things like that. And yet, when it comes down to it, at least 40 to 50% of the parts are simply not available in India. And where do we have to get it from? We have to get it from China. So how is anything here going to survive when you haven't developed both the depth and the breadth of Indian industry? This is such an anti-business, anti-industrial government. What do you do?
Okay. Suppose I ask you a hypothetical question. Suppose we tell the Americans we are willing to join Quad, which will be a military alliance, we will help you in the Indian Ocean, and you help us with the weapons that we need. Is that a feasible proposition? And will the Americans bite?
It might have been a feasible option up to about 4 or 5 years back, but with Biden and the way the Democrats are going today, it's like getting into a sea full of tiger sharks and great white sharks and bull sharks. If you want to take the chances, best of luck. I am not so brave.
Okay, so
The window of opportunity has closed. And I think he was your friend, the foreign minister of Israel, Abba Eban. He said this about the Palestinians, but it equally applies to India, that the Indians never lose an opportunity to lose an opportunity.
Okay, now having been so critical, both of us, let's look at a constructive way. What would you advise if you had a prime minister who will be willing to listen to you? What would you say, step 1, step 2, step 3, with the goal of ejecting China from Indian territory?
Okay. Number 1, you first need to have strategic ambiguity. Cannot be strategic schizophrenia. You can make other people guess, but you should not be schizophrenic enough that you don't know which side of your toast is buttered. First, make that decision. After that, when you've made your decision and decided who your friends are, this isn't shades of gray. We're not discussing Vedanta philosophy. Foreign policy is not Vedanta philosophy to go neiti, neiti. There is no room for neiti, neiti out here. So that decision has to first be made. Number 2, you go to the defense forces and you say there will be no duplication. You will have only one kind of long-range air-to-air missile, Army, Navy, Air Force. That long-range air-to-air missile will also be made a surface-to-air missile like the Israelis have done. And you will have one short-range. If you can combine the two, even better. This is going to be your defense budget for the next 30 years. There will be no out-of-pocket expenditure. You work backwards on this. You have to deal with a two-front war. I need an operational alternative to kick the Chinese out within the next 10 years so that when I say go, you go. Now, I don't care how you guys do it. You do it, and this is the budget. Work within this. After that, if you don't come, I am going to start sacking all your generals and denying you your admirals, air marshals, and generals promotions. None of you will go over the level of squadron leader ever. Because if you can't work within budgets and you can't work within timelines, you don't deserve to be anything more than a squadron leader. The third thing I would fundamentally do is expand the foreign service and actually make them do primary intelligence collection on the ground. Right now, the so-called Chinese speakers can't speak Chinese. The French speakers can't speak French. I think my kittens can meow better French than apparent French scholars can speak French. So all of this needs to be sorted out. You can't have such a tiny, your foreign service is your primary intelligence collector. And if you can't do that, then get into a serious relationship with countries like Singapore, Taiwan, and Japan, which have excellent intelligence collection within China. You can't be incompetent and moral. You can be immoral and incompetent, or you can be competent and immoral, but you can't be both immoral and incompetent.
Okay. I think my colleagues must be itching to ask you questions. So over to you, Jagdish, or Arvind, or Ramesh, which of you want to move in?
I have a question for Abhijit. Besides the China scenario, what you think has been our progress or failure on the American front or on the Afghanistan front? Can you just tell our viewers what do you feel on the other foreign foreign affairs front, especially on Afghanistan and on USA?
So with the USA, we're pretty much stuck in a situation where, we're walking on eggshells. Mostly because our foreign service never cultivates long-term relationships. You can look at a country like Israel, for example, where they can completely support one side of the political spectrum, but when the other side of the political spectrum comes to power, they still hug, kiss, make up, and make make it impossible for that new government to go against them. We don't have those diplomatic skills, number one, which is why we're walking on eggshells at the moment with America. On Afghanistan, Jagdish, if you remember, I'd gone there for a month-long tour in 2018, and I had sat and talked to, 2019, and I'd sat and spoken to a lot of these Taliban commanders and things like that, in all kinds of bizarre places like Ghor, Ghazni. I went to Ghor and Ghazni only to see where Mahmoud Ghazni and Muhammad Ghori were born. And I can tell you they are the most uncivilized places. So if people tell you that biryani came from there, I can tell you they don't even know what the hell biryani is out there. They definitely couldn't have brought it into this country. But anyway, jokes aside, those places are absolute. There is no culture that can come from Ghor and Ghazni because there is no culture in existence in Ghor and Ghazni. It is a bit like Humayunpur Basti or Yusuf Sarai ka slum in Delhi. Or think of Ghor and Ghazni essentially, as Jagdish, since you're in Bombay, as Dharavi. It's a mud brick Dharavi. Even the metal roofs.
Dharavi is now really prospered. You haven't been to Dharavi recently.
Acha, I haven't been to Dharavi. I only see it from the plane when you're landing at Santa Cruz.
Oh.
But it doesn't look very nice when you're landing from there.
But now the planes also come from the ocean. They don't come from Dharavi. They don't take you to Dharavi.
So what was amazing was when I went there and started talking to the local Taliban commanders, I got a picture which I hadn't seen written in Indian literature before. Because, Indians don't actually go to Afghanistan and do primary research. And because we don't read other people's languages, we don't speak Farsi or Dari or Urdu properly at least, we don't get their side of the story. So what most Indian strategic experts do is they read what an American has written, they pick and choose what they want. And that's a terrible way of doing research. It's just bad methodology. So when I went there, I found this whole thing. There wasn't a single Taliban commander I met who liked Pakistan. When you say Pakistan to a Taliban commander, his first reaction is, "Thoo!" And then he'll start talking to you after cursing Pakistan, Pakistan's mother, Pakistan's father, Pakistan's sister, Pakistan's sister-in-law, Pakistan ki pardadi jo 10-15,000 saal pehle mar gayi thi. They curse all of them. And then they say, why aren't you people helping us? Now, we gravely miscalculated what was happening in Afghanistan. We did not have our ears to the ground completely. Our development work there was spectacular. The issue is when our development work there was spectacular and reached out to the individual Afghan, why were we not willing to open our ears and listen to what they were saying to us? The Taliban are not some alien creature. It's like people who say the Nazis started Second World War. Who were the Nazis? They were Germans. The Germans started the Second World War. The Nazis were not aliens from outer space. Who are the Taliban? They are not aliens from outer space. They are your average Afghan. The average Afghan is extremely conservative with gender attitudes and things like that. We should have built our bridges then. We should have been playing divide and rule then. We should have been using people like Mullah Baradar and Anas Haqqani and whoever, whatever have you then. We did not. Today we are paying the price for it because we're getting into the game too late. And this 10-dimensional chess that everybody talks about that Modi plays, I can honestly tell you, I have never seen a worse game even of 2-dimensional chess, leave alone 10-dimensional chess. Because the point of foreign policy is not morality. It is to gather intelligence, to gauge weaknesses, to exploit weaknesses. We did not do that.
Yes,
Arvind,
Okay. My question starts from the first description which Dr. Swamy gave for today's program, failure of governance. And when he said 2021, our government had a monumental failure. And of course, both domestically and externally. But we are focusing on China today. So let me ask Dr. Swamy and Abhijit both. You see, we have been saying about Abhijit also mentioned about the permanent structure Chinese are building in Arunachal Pradesh or across the border or our part. And Dr. Swamy has been saying this, I think, for more than a year continuously, every day, maybe 4 times in a 24 hours. He has said that. There are very few intellectuals. Abhijit has, of course, acknowledged the same fact, what Dr. Swamy is saying. There are very few intellectuals who have been mentioning this. What about media? Media has totally ignored this fact. That's why we call it Godi media. Whether it is print or whether it is electronic, I have yet to see a single story, something which I have not seen is left that, but leaving that. But not a single story has appeared in any of the major publications or on channels about Chinese building infrastructure, buildings, defense structures, and so on and so forth on our part. But when the Chinese government recently announced that 15 names in Arunachal Pradesh have been changed, which Dr. Swamy mentioned today, Ministry of External Affairs had one liner to say, we don't recognize it. Dr. Swamy very sarcastically said, impotent. These people are not provoked by anything which you say. So what type of people we have in managing the show, what type of people we have in government who are not even responding to something which is hurled at them or thrown at them. Both Abhijit and Dr. Swamy can answer this.
Abhijit goes first.
No, you go first, Doctor.
Listen, there's a question, having been in government, in which also you participated with me, and Jagdish also. When there is a consultative decision making, you can't make mistakes, or you make very few mistakes. And you saw that when we were in office, the VP Singh had left the whole economy in a collapsed state. But we were interacting, and the bureaucracy was an input provider, but the decisions, etc., were being made by the politician. Today's system is, and I know some ministers who privately tell me this, and I feel sorry for them because they're really talented people. It is, if a minister signs a file, that's not final. It was in my time final. I didn't even consult the Prime Minister. But today it goes to the PMO, and the bureaucracy gives it, makes changes, sends it back, and sends it back for implementation, because the signature of the minister is already there. So the minister signs first, and then the PMO principal secretary signs after him. Of course, he has been given cabinet rank, so you can't even say that this is bad in ranking. So the problem is that with a prime minister who has a temper when it comes to juniors or underlings, everybody wants to first second guess the mood of the prime minister and then put it across like that. And that is the reason why we are making all these outrageous mistakes. The prime minister said, "Koi aaya nahi, koi gaya nahi." Nobody is ready to contradict it. And you are right, the media is also silent. And media, they tell me that, listen, our newspapers will be closed down. And so we are just biding our time. So, I mean, that's not an explanation, but that's what the explanation was during the emergency also. So I think we need now intellectuals, at least some politicians who who can, abuse and all. I'm not talking about opposition abuses even today, but in terms of articulation, alternative positions, that kind of thing has been seriously lacking in the Modi government, and that is why we are making these kinds of idiotic mistakes. Nobody wants to say something which somebody will say, "Why did you say this?" So you say, whatever, Pika reactions that you mentioned, that's bound to follow. Yes, Abhijit, what do you have to say?
My thing here is very simple. The problem with the media is, one, they're so consumed by their hatred of Hindus that they are not able to separate their hatred of Hindus from their hatred of Modi. Which is why you have people like Rahul Gandhi. Now, honestly, when somebody, the INC put out a tweet yesterday saying, don't you think Rahul would make a better prime minister than Modi? To me, that's like coming to an Indian in 1192 and saying, who would you prefer, Mahmud of Ghazni or Muhammad of Ghori? Right? Honestly, I'm not sure I'd prefer either one of those. A raider who comes 17 times and smashes my temples, or one who sets up his house permanently out here and decides to rule for the next 400-500 years. Now, the problem here is that we have this aura of an all-seeing, all-controlling prime minister, which is not true. What we have is compound incompetence, but because the press created its own story about this all-seeing, all-knowing eye, like the Lord of the Three Rings, the Great Eye of Mordor. They all see him as the Great Eye of Mordor, when in fact he's something like a hobbit. So there's nothing much you can do. So Godi media is two facets of the problem. One is pathological hatred of all Hindus. Second is being compromised to the Congress because of years of third-raters being propped up by, as great intellectuals. They'll write absolute rubbish. And, these people will come, all these so-called intellectuals come out and say, oh my God, he said the sun rose from the east and set in the west. I have never seen such a profound exposition of planetary mechanics since, Sanjaya wrote Dharma Kshetre, Kurukshetre, and then the entire Gita followed. This is the kind of thing the others, part 2 of Godi media is. Part 3 of Godi media is, they are so petrified, they are like a deer that has come in the headlights of a car at night, and they are completely paralyzed and don't know what to do, where they think that somebody incompetent is the greatest, the reincarnation of Ravana and Mahishasura and what have you. So we should be very kind to them. They are not Godi media. They are basically Alpa Buddhi media. Let's call them that. We should never attribute to malice what you can to stupidity.
Yeah, but what about Ramesh? He's gone off the program?
No, this ostrich-like reaction from the government. In Hindi we say, "Shutur murgi ravaiya." अपना गर्दन आप रेत के अंदर डाल दो कि हमें कुछ दिख नहीं रहा. I mean, this kind of thing we can't handle the international situation. For poverty, for health problem, education problem, those we can do. We can afford to do that. But internationally, we can't afford to do that.
Yeah, Ramesh.
Sorry, sir. I've been in and out of this discussion because we have been in trouble with something else.
Okay, then
I don't have any honest questions because it would have been answered already. So I thank you for the opportunity, though. Hi, Abhijit.
Okay.
Hey, Ramesh.
Before
I have a question for Abhijit. Abhijit, all countries surrounding India, where we are such a large country, and Nepal, Maldives, Sri Lanka, and all these countries, we are slowly losing all our friends to China. What do you think on this aspect of our neighborhood, and how you think the government has been handling this situation? Because a lot of viewers have been asking this question on, especially in relation to Maldives and Sri Lanka, and especially what's happening on Sri Lanka in the last few weeks. So could you enlighten our viewers with your insight on these matters?
So I think I covered that already, but basically nothing's changed. We continue to treat our friends like dirt. We continue to worship those who will treat us as enemies, as our gods. It goes back to this Indian habit that you treat people who respect you with contempt, and you treat those who are contemptuous of you with respect. Sri Lanka deserves better. Bangladesh deserves better. Maldives deserves better. And I really think every Indian should apologize to the leadership of those three countries that we've let them down so badly.
Right.
Thank you. Arvind, do you have any further questions?
No, when he mentioned about Bangladesh and others, let me also tell you, economically, I mean, if we look at some kind of correlation between our international relations and economic progress, Bangladesh has been doing much better than India in last 10 years. And
Absolutely.
and even on the global front, Bangladesh does not have as bad relations with neighbors as India has. So, I mean, if you compare India and Bangladesh on one-to-one, I think Bangladesh is far ahead of India. And of course, China, India cannot be compared. I've been to China 3 times. The kind of progress that I've seen, I mean, leaving aside the international situation between India and China, China's progress, India can never match in next 15 years. Let me tell you that. I've been saying this earlier. And of course, Dr. Swamy has given the growth projection that maybe in 10 years we can overtake China. No, not possible in my view.
Abhijit, I have one
Yeah,
question for you, if this has not been asked. Influence of China and Sri Lanka and its impact on India.
Yeah.
Why not Nepal? Nepal,
I think
No. Let's start because Sri Lanka is strategic. I mean, Nepal is also true. But
You're asking Abhijit?
yes, sir. To start with, so and then we'll definitely want your opinion because you're more close. You're interacted very close with the leadership in Sri Lanka as well. So, yeah.
so. I'm going to juxtapose Sri Lanka with Burma so that you understand the context better.
Okay.
Of
Actually,
all
that
of
was the next
China's
question.
neighbors,
Yes,
I don't
absolutely.
think I don't think any other country across China's periphery, including Russia and North Korea, have been able to deal with China as adeptly as Burma has. They know when to drag them in projects and things like that. And when it suits them, they just kick them out altogether. You know, there was a dam project in the north that they gave the Chinese, and they decided one fine day the Chinese were getting too cocky. So they just kicked them out lock, stock, and barrel.
How?
And they have been at this because they settled their border dispute with them. They keep a very strict control on society. This is something I read from Dr. Swamy's book, actually, 15, 20 years back, where, they settled on a line because the McMahon line extends to Burma. They settled on a line very similar to the McMahon line, but not the McMahon line. It was hardly any territorial changes. Like Dr. Swamy pointed out, what the Chinese wanted was a validation that we have returned after our humiliation. They didn't want the land, they wanted the validation. Burma understood that and it settled it. So they have known how to play China for a long time. Sri Lanka, in all my interactions with their leadership, be it Chandrika Kumaratunga or Mahinda Rajapaksa's government or the succeeding governments, even Sirisena's government, what I realized was they had a very careful, calculated, elaborate plan to deal with China if and only if India played its role properly. Now, the problem here is they are sitting back thinking, I am telling you, use me to screw China over. Why are you not using me? It's literally, it is like, if you're going to meet somebody and they send you a Rolls Royce to sit down, because of your arrogance and your sense of self-esteem and pride, you say, I am not going to take the Rolls Royce because it is yours. I am going to come in an auto that's going to break down 15, 20 times on the 5-kilometer route. But I have more pride because even though I'm a beggar, I have pride and I don't want your Rolls Royce. So this kind of cut my nose to spite my face policy is very characteristic of India. I think the great flaw of the Rajapaksas, of Sirisena, of Kumaratunga was that they expected a smart Indian leadership that understood Indian interests. They never expected with all due prior apologies to duffers, they didn't expect a litany of duffers.
Dr.
Well,
Swamy,
part
your
of
input.
what I would say there is a deep inferiority complex in our international bureaucracy. they fawn over the Westerner, especially the West European and the Americans. And they will go to any length to bear insults and so on. I saw this when Modi went recently, and how they all crawled over to get the vice president to meet the prime minister, although protocol wise, the prime minister is not supposed to go and meet the vice president of the United States in her room, that she's expected to come. That's what was the past practice. And so this inferiority complex of the white man is still there, and and then it reflects into saying that somehow your neighborhood can take it for granted, and that's how it's coming into play, in my opinion. We are making a massive mistake. But I would add now, as a kind of from my side, a concluding comment. I don't think any of the visitors, the people who are listening to our program should feel at all depressed, because first you must know the malaise before you can rectify it. I've seen I've been in politics since 1969. That makes it 50 years. I think I've been in politics, 50 plus. Plus, of course, part of my adult life, which was internationally spent in being a professor at Harvard. So I have seen India being disparaged and then India suddenly coming up. I've seen India begging for food from the Americans on PL 480, and then the India of Green Revolution. It just took one prime minister to change it all, namely Lal Bahadur Shastri, who brought in the Green Revolution. Similarly, we were always told the Hindu rate of growth is 3.5% per year. Amartya Sen and all these people used to say, you can never catch up with China. Because that time China and all its fake statistics were saying they're growing at 10 to 15% growth rate. But Narasimha Rao came, and in 5 years, he moved us from 2% growth rate right up to 8% per year in 5 years. And he was so badly treated afterwards by Sonia Gandhi because of the jealousy factor. But Narasimha Rao proved it can be done. And even today, I'm telling you, we can grow between 10 to 14% per year for 10 years without difficulty, because we have got everything in place. Only thing it needs is somebody to put it together and convert it into an engine. So I don't want anybody to think that we think that India is in the pits. India, even if it's in the pits, can climb out of it. It's got that. We are the only surviving civilization of the 45 civilizations that the United Nations, UNESCO has tabulated. Only surviving. All 44 have disappeared, whether it's Mesopotamia or Babylon, or whether it's the Parsis, Iran, or whether it is Egypt, all disappeared. But India is the only surviving civilization. So all you need is somebody who is able to bring together all this talent and then work into a team and decentralize. Nobody can run this country by centralization. Mrs. Gandhi failed, and Modi has already failed because of his centralization. We need a decentralized governing system. Then India will become a world power, overtake China within 10 years, and prove Mr. Arvind Chaturvedi wrong.
Sir, I have one other question. I know this Abhijit is going to not be happy about this question. What should India do in Myanmar? Like in America, we always say we spread democracy. I know that's going to rile up Abhijit. But in the sense, should India interfere in Myanmar to do something? And then, of course, Abhijit, you're welcome to chime in later.
You mean in favor of democracy?
Yes.
India should tell the Myanmar government, we have a choice. Either we support democracy or we support you. And depends on how they behave. And I don't think we should decide unilaterally in terms of anything, because what has been shown is that democracy hasn't got the kind of roots which in India we have. Mrs. Gandhi was defeated, including in our own constituency, not by the educated people of India. The educated people of India means you and me, Ramesh, the Madrasis, the Kannadigas, the Keralites, the Andhrites. They all voted for Mrs. Gandhi. It is this illiterate Uttar Pradesh wala, like this chap sitting here, Arvind Chaturvedi. These illiterates, they went and voted against her, defeated her and her son. Otherwise, you'll never have got democracy back.
Yeah, I think that's why Abhijit, that's why Dr. Arvind Chaturvedi, with the vengeance, got his doctor after the emergency. Okay, Abhijit, your thoughts on India's, what should India do in Myanmar?
Oh, me?
No,
Me?
No, you answered. I just want Abhijit.
Yes, I answered. No, there's no black and white.
Okay.
You tell them you're with us or we will go for democracy. Because they have toppled the democracy, no?
Exactly.
And so I don't think, frankly, as of now, this may not be to the liking of many people. We should get into this question of Tibet independence and Taiwan independence at this stage. First, show to the world that we can defeat the Chinese. You show that on this most favorable ground for you. The Chinese are stupid coming here, because any other government would have kicked them out and become a global power, a recognized global power. But I would like us to first solve this problem, then automatically we can do many other things.
Abhijit, do you have anything to add?
No,
Dr. Swamy,
Okay.
So,
Dr.
see,
Swamy,
my only thing about Myanmar is the teacher, we are the student. In spite of 70 years of independence and claiming ourselves a great and hoary civilization, Myanmar has taught us more about solving disputes with China and how to play with China as if it were an irrelevant toy almost. And mind you, if India's power differential with China is, say, 1:15, then Burma's power differential with China is 1:100, 150. More. So imagine a country so much weaker than us is able to play China off so much better than us. I think Jaishankar should go to Rangoon and do Pada Puja to every single Myanmarese general and politician and drink their Charanamrit in the hope that he'll get some knowledge and wisdom from them.
Ramesh, you are off. Your mic is muted, Ramesh ji.
Sorry. Dr. Swamy has mentioned this in our program earlier, Abhijit, that Chinese respect if you stand up to them, right? If you're meek, they don't actually respect you. Chinese actually respect when you stand up to them. He has mentioned that's exactly what Burma is doing. I mean, based on what he just said, they're just standing up for themselves.
Yeah,
I have a plan.
Exactly right. And there is a whole, this is first of all human psychology. And second, with China, this has always been, like Dr. Swamy said, there's a whole book about this by Alistair Ian Johnston, The Strategic Culture of China, where, every time they are weak, they pretend they're doing the world a great favor. And every time they're strong, they come and they say, no favors, slap, 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 slap. So they are people who respect strength. If you are a weakling, they will walk all over you. And mind you, they respect, your size doesn't matter. There was a Vietnamese general who came to the Raisina dialogue some 4 or 5 years back. And he made fun of India sitting on an Indian platform. He said, look at India, you're so big. Look at us, we are so small. And yet we thrash the Chinese. You don't need a big army to deal with the Chinese. You need a big heart. And you need a heart of steel. Now, a Vietnamese general is able to come and make fun of Indians in India, which says a lot.
In a negative sort of way, let me add, The only Indian politician that the Chinese media is attacking today is me and not Narendra Modi.
You have credibility now, Dr. Swamy. Okay,
Jagdish
Jagdish,
was
you had a
trying to.
question.
Yeah, I have a question. I want to move a little away from foreign affairs and come to internal affairs. What Abhijit Iyer thinks about, one is the withdrawal of the farm bill, and number two, inaction on framing of rules for the CAA. It's in two parts. What he thinks about the withdrawal of the farm bill after so much of protest, of so many deaths and so many allegations, and then on this issue first, and then I would like to ask him why the CAA has not been taken forward with not a single citizen or a refugee being given the citizenship status. You can take the farm bill first, because this is part of our internal affairs which is in the country. We discussed about foreign affairs already.
Right. So this is one of the areas where Dr. Swamy and I disagree completely, because I actually supported the Farm Bill completely. I thought it was a step in the right direction. I did not think there was a need for the so-called public consultation, because these protests, for me, if you study the nature of the Khalistan movement and how it was disproportionately, controlled by the landlords. Also, the fact that because of the grips of terrorism, Punjab completely missed out on that big cycle of industrialization from 1991 onwards. There is something very unique about Punjab that made it protest all these things. Punjab has basically signed its death warrant, because in another 10 to 15 years, their water table is going to dry up completely, and they're going to be left, forget MSP, they won't have anything to sell for MSP except packaged air. So this was crucial for Punjab to happen. But as Dr. Swamy will also tell you, I have been talking to him about this at least since what Dr. Swamy, at least in 2011-12, where I've been coming and briefing you about the Canadian, the Khalistani things that we've been seeing in Canada and the UK, where I've been telling you since then how Indian diplomats are watching it, how we're not paying attention to it, how they're gaining in strength, how they have become thugs within the Labour Party, and they're going to do a hijack of the Labour Party. Now they've hijacked both the Labour Party, and that Jagmeet Singh has hijacked that other party as well. This was something that was waiting to happen. They today project their withdrawal of the Farm Bill as somehow being done to prevent Khalistani influence from spreading. It is the opposite. The Khalistani influence had already spread. They tried piggybacking on a lot of things. This was one more issue they tried piggybacking on, and they are now seeing it as the success of their finances. There may have been genuine farmers here who won, but the way it is being projected in Canada and the UK, it is a huge morale booster for Khalistanis. You have basically done today what Indira Gandhi and Zail Singh tried to do with Bhindranwale in the 1980s, which was try to bring down the Akalis using Bhindranwale. You are going to see the consequences 4 to 5 years down the line. Punjab is going to see another cycle of militancy, and mark my words, this will be the seminal moment that led up to it. As for the CAA, NRC, you know, this government does a lot of talking about Hindu, Hindu, Hindu. I wish they were half as Hindu as they claim they are. Because like with all other things, they're very good at giving speeches. They're not very good at executing on the ground. So we saw all that tamasha of Shaheen Bagh. What did we go through the Delhi riots, Shaheen Bagh and everything for? If you're not even implementing what you said you would implement. So what you're seeing is policy confusion, bad inputs, compound incompetence and klutziness. There's nothing you can do about it. We are, yatha praja tata raja.
Well, let me add one correction. What I have gone on record, written in op-eds and so on, is that this farm bill is welcome. I voted for it in Parliament, and I said implement it only in the BJP ruled states. If you can show that this is really good and it improves the I think others make it optional. In other words, those who want to implement it, we will assist. Those who don't want to implement, we will not interfere. Then automatically you would have seen the good effects of this farm bill in the other states, and then Punjab would have had no alternative but to fall in line. So that would be the way to do it. But unfortunately, the Prime Minister didn't listen, as he never listens to me on anything.
Abhijit, before we proceed, there is a question on the screen. If you see it, why is the CDS not yet appointed and vacant for the last 30 days? You have been you have been talking on security matters and defense. Can our viewers get some information on this?
After him, I will say a word.
Like
Yes,
I said,
sure.
Huh?
like I said, this government is a joke when it comes to security policy. For the chief of your defense staff to not be appointed even after 30 days, what are you? Are you in brain freeze? You know who the contenders for the post are. How long does it take you to sit and take a decision? Do you remember that serial Mahabharata where Dhritarashtra used to be Sanjaya, bolo kya ho raha hai kind of thing? This is basically that. This is Sanjaya, kisko main appoint karu? This is the same. You call it Neville Chamberlain Part 4 or Dhritarashtra Part 71 or Nehru Part 2. It's kind of, you can actually create a time series. Dhritarashtra, Neville Chamberlain, Nehru, Modi.
Well, I can tell you what the gossip is. I have no first-hand information. But my gossip is not just wild gossip of Mylapore mummies, but from serious people. Strictly speaking, since it had gone to the army and it has been truncated by an air crash, it should go to Naravane, who is presently the commander-in-chief of the army. But Naravane has been from day one very, very hostile to China. And I think probably the Prime Minister would prefer the naval chief to be the new CDC, which the armed forces are all potentially, not actually potentially, in revolt. So therefore, no appointments.
Arvind, before you wind up, I have one short question to Abhijit. What is the best performance or the best highlight, one point of the government in the past year? Both I want to ask Dr. Swamy and Abhijit that which is the most best part of governance of the present government at the center. If you can tell us, Abhijit, your answer, and Dr. Swamy, your answer.
Can I just say the least incompetent part? Let's say the least, yeah. So the least negative part, I would say, was there, and you might all laugh at me for saying this, was there COVID management. Because, the powers had all been delegated to the states mucked up. Should there have, of course, been more coordination? Because, when you see a child waiting to jump off the balcony, the mother can't just say, "Bachche ko seekhne do," and let him jump off the balcony. So there is certainly a case to be made here for a error of omission, simply because omission isn't considered a crime in the Indian legal system. And I'd say that is the sort of least negative thing that the government did. But on the positive side, we should also acknowledge that once they got into the vaccine game, they ramped up vaccines very, very quickly. So that was a good thing to be done.
Dr. Swamy?
Well, I've been searching and searching and searching. I came to the conclusion that the best thing that Modi has done is to tolerate me.
Okay. Arvind, it's your time to wind up. We have already reached 1 hour and 24 minutes. Arvind, your mic is off. 1 hour, 24 minutes.
Before I wind up, let me just compliment Abhijit for saying about the non-selection of CDS. He gave several examples, and I give an example of Sholay film. There was a character called, A.K. Hangal played a character called Rahim Chacha, and Rahim Chacha comes now and then saying, "Itna sannata kyun hai bhai?" Now this "itna sannata kyun hai bhai?" This sannata is in government. And this sannata is because the government is not acting at all. People have been saying about Narasimha Rao that he said no action is also an action, or no decision is also a decision. And I think the current government, Modi 2.0, is worse than Narasimha Rao government. Narasimha Rao, he had a policy that no decision is a good decision, but this government is just not listening to anything and just not taking note of anything and not doing anything. Yes, Ramesh has
I just want one point. I disagree with you, Dr. Arvind Chaturvedi, is that the government is acting or not acting, but I think the Prime Minister is acting phenomenally.
He's acting better than A.K. Hangal?
No, I'm just saying, I think he's the best actor for the year.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So,
Okay,
and
go ahead, finish it, please.
someone has queried why nobody has talked about the Air India thing. It's coming up in as my PIL on day after tomorrow in the Delhi High Court.
And we can discuss it next week, Dr. Swamy, about that?
Yes, we can.
Okay,
We can.
okay.
We will
And
make it
just
part of
before
the-
I give a last note, let me also add to what Abhijit said about the farmers' movement. Dr. Swamy had, of course, clarified that he was the first person to support. In fact, he was vocal in supporting this. Only thing is, when the Kisan movement went on for long and there were issues that farmers are suffering and all that, then he came up with a solution that let us implement it in the states where the BJP is in power. But even that government did not listen. My comment is on that. Modi has been claiming a 56-inch chest. What has happened to this withdrawal of 3 farmers' bill after 365 days plus? Do you think the 56 has become 36, Abhijit?
Well, I don't think it was 56 even to begin with. I think we gone from 36 to 15, 16.
Right.
Arvind,
This was
please,
all fantastic.
You have to conclude.
This was all.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
sorry.
you.
Just yeah.
Yeah. You have a comment to make, Abhijit? Last comment?
Yeah, all this 56-inch, this was all phantasmagoria. It was all a projection wherein, you can take a tiny ant and put it right in front of a very powerful projection light and it looks like it's 100 feet high. I think that's what we're seeing. The spotlight has been removed and the true size has been revealed.
Thank you. Somebody has commented 56-inch balloon. But anyway, that's of course. In fact, one thing which I've noticed today, our viewers are participating so actively that their number of comments are almost 8 to 10 comments per minute. That in a 60-minute program or a 70-minute program, more than 600 comments, and all comments very meaningful comments. So I must congratulate the viewers for their participation and support. Not only support in viewership, but also support in actively participating through our comment section. And if you look at the comment section, maybe we can also compile them sometime. Very intelligent comments and very meaningful comments. Thank you, viewers, for your comments and participation. Thank you, Abhijit, for sparing time today to discuss the 2021 year gone by and reviewing that year. Of course, most of the time today was devoted to external things and more to China. But as Jagdish had said in the beginning, this is only part 1. And Dr. Swamy has also hinted they may be needing to part 3 also. So maybe part 2 and part 3, if there is a part 3, we will discuss other issues also. Jagdish did touch on the Kisan movement, which is a very important issue. Maybe such issues will take up in the next episode. Next episode will be on Sunday, the 9th of January 8 p.m. Indian Standard Time, and we'll have other guests to discuss the other issues related to the year gone by. Thank you, Dr. Swamy. Thank you, Abhijit. Thanks, Ramesh, Jagdish Shetty ji, and our technical team led by Ashish, Gadgi Rakesh, Ishwar Iyer, Swaminathan, Tejas, Vishal Mehta, and Ajesh. Thank you very much. We will be meeting next Sunday again with a different issue, different aspect of the discussion, today's discussion, which is year 2021, and where have we failed if we have failed. Thank you very much. We will be meeting next Sunday again 8 p.m. Till then, Namaskar, Jai Hind.
Jai Hind. Dhanyawad.
We did a record